Good morning, children. Once again, we are back with our syllabus. So, from today onwards, we are going to continue with our final term portion, right? So, I would like to start with your chapter that is structural changes in the Indian economy after liberalization. Okay, so basically, what were the changes which was brought up in our economy after liberalization? So before beginning this chapter, we have to understand what was liberalization and why it was brought up, right? So let me tell you all, according when during the period of, or you can say like in the eve of independence, or during the eve of independence, our economy was in a very stagnant position or in a very poor state, right? Because Britishers ruled our country for a very longer period, and they deteriorated each and every wealth of our country. They brought up our country into the worst state. So, there were requirements of reforms in our country. So, our new government brought up new economic policy, that is NEP. NEP, that is New Economic Policy, in the year 1991. So let me once again tell you all, when was the new economic policy brought up? In the year 1991. So when this new economic policy was brought up, it was brought up for the motive of the development of our country, for the motive of the economic reforms of our country. So they included three main policies or three main instruments under it. So that terms are called as LPG. Please don't take it as LPG gas or LPG cylinders. It is LPG. L stands for liberalization, P stands for privatization, and G stands for globalization. Is it clear? So what were the three major policy measures under new economic policies? LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Okay. We very well know that our country is an underdeveloped country or a developing country, right? So we do not have that high standard of living in our country, but because of the rule of the Britishers in our country and their harsh or impositions on our country deteriorated and deteriorated. The conditions of the people, the condition of the economy were at their worst. So it was really very necessary for the new reforms. Okay, so we all have studied earlier that there exist three types of economy in our country, or sorry, there are three types of economy as a whole, that is capitalist economy, socialist economy, and mixed economy, right? So India comes under the category of mixed economy because in our country there exist both private sectors as well as public sectors. So because there exists both private sector and public sector, our country comes under the mixed economy system. Now, since 1991, with the adoption of new economic policy, which is also called as economic reforms, privatization is an essential part of the new policy. It has resulted in the contraction of the public sector and the expansion of the private sector, because earlier private sector were not able to set up their industries because there were many legal formalities that they have to fulfill. But after privatization, that Independence has been given to private sectors also, so that they can set up their own industries, they can expand their sector. So slowly and steadily public sectors gets contracted and private sectors emerge as a very important role in our country. Is it clear? Now, many of the public sector enterprises were sold to private sectors as well, okay, because public sectors were not operating in the desired manner. So they were bound to sell it to the private sector so that they can manage their working and they can at least uplift the working of the private sectors, or uplift the working of the public sector. And that policy was called as disinvestment policy, because public sectors were sold up to the private sector. Now, policy of liberalization, that is L, that has been adopted as a part of the new policy, okay. Under this policy, regulations on the you can say private sector through licensing and other such policies have been reduced, because earlier there were many formalities, many legal formalities, many licensing formalities which private sectors have to fulfill. But because of this liberalization, they have got certain kind of exemptions from their working. Next is your globalization. Earlier, free flow of goods from one country to the other country was restricted, but because of globalization, it has been made free. Easily, one country can import and the other country can export. Earlier, there were quotas and tariffs, which we will study in the next part, okay. There were quotas and tariffs, because of which you can say the countries were not able to trade properly. But because of globalization, now they are free to trade with any of the countries they desire. So these were the, you can say, these are the some highlights of the new economic policies, that is LPG: liberalization, privatization and globalization. Because of this new economic policy, slowly and steadily our country's economic scenario started improving. Is it clear? That is why it plays a very important role in this reform. I hope this is clear. So let me tell you something more about this economic policy. Dr. Manmohan Singh, is it clear? He was the finance minister at that particular point of time during 1991, and he has been considered as the think tank of economic reforms, because these ideas, this we can say this articulation of the ideas were done under him. That is why Dr. Manmohan Singh is considered to be the think tank of economic reforms. So that's all for today. In our next class, we'll continue with our chapter. Thank you. Bye-bye.